We are on an absolute roll this month because once again I have something very special for you, my friends. There are a couple of positions and movement patterns that can help you achieve full body mastery to an uncanny degree. But that also means that if you can do some or all of them, that means that you have almost perfect control over your entire body and that you have surpassed the beginner or even intermediate level. So today we're going to check out what kind of movement patterns and positions those are, how you can reach them so you can have total body mastery. So if you're ready, let's go and have some fun. Now, since most people will struggle with doing any of those movements, we're going to start out with the easiest ones first, being the classic reverse tabletop position. An absurdly effective position at opening up your hips, working on your hip mobility and your shoulder mobility, but we are not beginners here, which is why we want to maximize all of the benefits we can reap from it by adding the slightest dynamic movement to this. Now, what will happen for most people is that their hips start lowering, and that's because they have a weak posterior chain or lacking anterior chain flexibility. And to combat that, you will require immense activation of your glutes, your spinal erectors, and your biceps to keep this position up here. And now comes the movement part. We will sway with our shoulders towards our fingertips, adding wrist mobility as well as more stretch for our pecs and our deltoids, opening up our chest much more, and doing the opposite by swaying with our knees towards our toes, working on complete ankle mobility in the flexion position as well as extension position. And during this dynamic movement, you will have to activate even more of your posterior chain to keep your hips from falling lower. Now, while this looks very easy, trust me, if you want to go for a full minute of this, this can be absolutely exhausting, but it is insanely effective at working on some of the worst problem zones in our body, being our hips and our shoulders when it comes to both mobility as well as strength and flexibility, leading to reduced risk of injury, but most importantly, full control over your posterior chain in short dynamic movements. Moving us to the second position and the exact opposite of what we just did, because there is absolutely no position that demonstrates complete posterior chain flexibility like the pike or forward fold, which is basically just complete hinge or flexion in our lumbar spine, lengthening every single muscle and tendon and ligament in our posterior chain, our gastric, our soleus, our biceps, our glutes, our spinal erectors, our traps, our lats, and our shoulders as well. Not to mention that we get a nice little decompression of our neck, which usually carries a lot of tension. And while folding forward is very simple, there are only two things you should keep in mind so you can make this as simple as possible, is to keep your back in extension until you are as low as possible, maximizing the stretch you're going to have in your posterior chain in your lower body. And only once you have reached this position and stretch down here, you can start rounding to get some flexibility in your posterior chain in your upper body as well. And the second most important thing, and one of the mistakes that almost everyone does when they fall into a forward fold, the lower you move towards the ground, the more your hips start falling backwards to compensate for lack of mobility you have around your ankles and in your lower leg musculature, which means that you have to be careful to keep your butt all the way in the front here to maximize the stretch you have around your Achilles and your lower musculature, but also so you do not cheat yourself out of extra flexibility you can get out of your hamstrings by pushing your hips back. So keep those two things in mind and start working on your forward fold so you too can become a master of posterior chain flexibility. Bringing us to one of the most foundational and fundamental movements or positions in general, being your ability to lower down into a deep squat or resting squat with your feet fully flat on the ground, being able to stay in this position comfortably without requiring any sort of strength or balance and enjoy this position. Since we are talking about full body control, that means we're going to break it down into two aspects. The classical deep squat, feet flat on the ground, using both legs, symmetrical movement pattern, as well as the pistol squat, a demonstration of basically full body control and tension and strength connected to flexibility. And most importantly, an insane amount of full body control to execute a perfect pistol squat. And here are two things you can do for both of these exercises to perfectly master them, being elevation for your feet and a counterweight, because you can't even imagine how easy it is to execute a perfect squat form if you are using both of those tools. Number one, elevating your heels means you need a lot less flexibility and a lot less mobility in all of those three joints. And once you start adding that counterweight, now you don't even need any strength from your hip flexors or your core to balance yourself in this position. So you can use that to work on your squat form and start reducing the counterweight and start reducing the elevation until you can go through the movement all by yourself. And using elevation and weight can help you with the pistol squat as well. Starting with your foot elevated would make it easier for you to lower down, because you need a lot less flexibility and a lot less strength to keep that leg up here. Over time, you can start reduce that elevation, and once again, having the counterweight will keep you from falling backwards, and over time, you're not gonna need that too. This moves us to one of the most important calisthenics foundations you will ever work on: scapular depression in a hanging position, or the so-called scapular pull-up, which makes up the foundation of every single pull-up move you will ever start working on. And if you want to have total control over your scapula, that means being able to go through complete scapular elevation, complete depression, as well as adduction and abduction. You will not get around working on a scapular pull-up, specifically the symmetrical scapular pull-up, which will make up the foundation of all the straight pulling motions, as well as the asymmetrical scapular pull-up, which will make up the foundation of all the diagonal or lateral pulling motions. Working on scapular positioning with resistance while hanging from a bar is one of the absolute must-do things when you want to advance past the beginner level in calisthenics, and is a foundational movement that everyone should start learning as soon as possible. Now, things are going to get much harder starting here.
That's what she said.
If the forward fold is a perfect demonstration of posterior chain flexibility, then the back bend or back bridge is a perfect demonstration of anterior chain flexibility. And now comes the really cool part, because if you combine the back bridge with the forward fold, now you have complete posterior and anterior chain flexibility. But more importantly, you have worked on your spinal flexion, your rounding back ability, as well as your spinal extension, which are two very foundational movements that everyone should be perfectly able to do, which is going to help you avoid a lot of injuries while strengthening your core and the surrounding muscles to help you advance with all kinds of other movement patterns and exercise. So not only are we strengthening all the muscles we were stretching during our pike position, but now we are stretching our tibialis by elevating our heels, our quadriceps and hip flexors by elevating our butt, and our abdominals, chest, shoulders, triceps, biceps, and wrists by elevating our chest and upper body, going through every single muscle, starting at our toes all the way up to our fingertips. Not to mention that it looks pretty impressive and pretty cool to be able to back bend. With the next exercise being one of the best things you can do for shoulder mobility as well as total body control and tension, being skin the cat, rotating yourself into this complete rotation in your rotator cuff and lowering down your body into this complete chest and deltoid stretch, keeping your stomach tight and your body extended, flexing your entire anterior chain and reversing the movement in a controlled fashion, which can help you work on things like the tucked lever, which is basically half of the movement, to develop more core strength while building the necessary shoulder mobility for more advanced positions, such as extending into the back lever. I would highly advise you though to be careful with this exercise. If you want to learn how to do it step by step, you can check out this video where we go through it from the very beginner level all the way to doing complete extended skin the cat. And before we get to the creme de la creme and the most important exercise on this list, we have one more intermediate level one, being your ability to go through a dynamic 90-90 switch without using your hands for help, which not only demonstrates an insane amount of hip, knee and ankle mobility and control of the surrounding musculature, but also an insane amount of hip and core strength, which is very important when you want to go through movements such as these. Help you brace your core when you go through powerlifting movements such as deadlifts and deep squats. You can't really get far when it comes to fitness with a weak core, and you can't really get far when it comes to lower body mobility without total control over those three joints and their surrounding musculature. And the 90-90 switch takes you through all of these. We have complete ankle extension, complete ankle flexion. We have rotational forces on our knees, strengthening that joint. We go through internal and external hip rotation in combination with each other in an asymmetrical movement pattern, which is very important to learn since humans don't usually work in symmetrical movement patterns. And we put all of this together while reducing our injury risk in our knees and our hips and our ankles, which once again are some of the most injury-prone regions in our body, and we have taken care of those with one single movement. And now to our last and most impressive exercise on this list, and the one that will take you the longest to learn, but is an insanely effective demonstration of complete body control, strength and tension. The complete circular pull-up into both directions, which is basically just a unilateral combination of the archer pull-up, the top point of the typewriter pull-up, as well as the reversal. And this one single pulling motion not only works every single muscle fiber in your upper body, moving all the way down through your back, your glutes, to your leg musculature, so we can keep a fully straight body without shifting around too much and without using momentum for this movement. But it'll also help you strengthen your shoulder joint, your elbows and your wrists, help you work on scapular control, putting together everything we've learned through the scapular pull-ups, and is a great way to get away from all the classic pulling motions, which can get really boring once we are in the ballpark of more than 10 repetitions. And of course, if you want to learn how to do that step by step, you can check out this video where we go through it once again from the very beginner level all the way to executing a perfect circular pull-up. There you have it, a handful of exercises that will help you master your body to an absurdly advanced degree. And I'm wondering, how many of those can you already do? How many of those would you like to learn? And if you want to learn one of these, but you don't know how, tell me in the comments and we'll go through a step-by-step tutorial so you can get right to it. But with that said, if you like the video and join us. We do stuff like that pretty much every single day, which means that I'll see you tomorrow. So until then, Captain Cairo, peace out.